Well, here it is, the first, underline the first webinar of 2024. And today we are talking about strategies to boost sales performance. Boy, I'll tell you what, we were out of the gates quickly this year and talking about something that everybody who is watching this can certainly take away tons from today. Looking forward to it. So I want to thank you for joining us as always. And a couple of reminders here with our HFA webinars is that first and foremost, bottom part of the screen, you'll see that there's a Q&A function. If you're joining us live on the webinar, you'll see a Q&A function. So if you have a question, pop it in there. We'll do our best to get to that. And all of these webinars are going to be, this one and others are stacked up at myhfa.org/webinar. It's our library of webinars. So you can go there at any time and pick the subject matter you want. And believe me, we've got amazing, amazing content there for you to see. Always want to thank, of course, Synchrony. They are our thought leaders here for education at HFA for sponsoring this. So I've got that out of the way. I want to introduce the panel. We've got a full screen today because this is a subject matter that needs certainly as much input as possible. And we've got four really amazing panelists today. Let me introduce them right now. Matt Pridemore is joining us. He's a sales trainer for the HFA Sales Academy. He also owns a number of franchise clothing, furniture stores. I'm jet lagged, folks. Yeah, this is furniture, right? Yeah, exactly. He owns 16 stores down in the Southeast and is very, very good at what he does. Also, by the way, was the 2023 Emerging Star for our Retailer of the Year Award. So Matt, would love having you here. Appreciate that. Jody Sievert joins us. She is the owner of One by One. It's a sales training company focusing on interior design as well as home furnishings. And so we're going to be looking forward, Jody, to hearing from you today. So thank you for being here as well. We have Josh Ortiz. He's a sales manager at NFM in the Colony. That's the Nebraska Furniture Mart there. Huge, amazing facility. And I know you've got a lot to bring to the table. So Josh, I appreciate you as well. And rounding us out is Mary Holzer. She is the sales manager at Interiors Home. Interiors Home, I want to say also a former Retailer of the Year recipient, amazing retailer. And I've had a chance to visit your stores. And let me tell you something, I know that you're also going to bring a lot to the table today. So everybody, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. I want to start out. I don't generally start out with a toss-up question, but I'm going to let somebody take this on. I just had this sense as I was really digging into this subject matter before we got together today. And I just came up with this question. Why are we continually talking about this? I mean, this is a sales industry. We've had challenges with closing, with all of these things we're talking about. Why is this such a consistent subject, a consistent area that we have to address when it's the very basis for what the home furnishing industry is all about? Why do we have to keep talking about this? Who wants to jump in and start off this extravaganza today?
Well, I'll give a thought here is that, your consumer base is always evolving and always changing, and their needs are different within the dynamic, within the demographic. And if we don't constantly work to change and evolve and shift and adapt within the tried and true processes, you're going to stay stale. You're going to stay the same. So in order to be ahead of the curve and meet the headwinds that are coming forward, you have to plan and prepare for it. Absolutely.
Okay. Who else wants to jump in?
I'll take it. I would say that's similar to Mary's, except the opposite. And that is, if we keep doing some of the same things we've been doing and getting the same results, we're going to keep having this conversation. So what are the things, to Mary's point, what are the things that we need to be doing differently that would produce different results from what we do now continuously that has us have this conversation over and over again?
Okay. I love that. You agreed with her, but you said it was the exact opposite.
Absolutely.
I already love where this panel is going today. I love that. Matt or Josh, you want to also jump in on that?
Yeah, talk about contrary, huh? Good mood to be in, huh? No, I think for myself, I think if we look back a couple of years at where we were during those toughest times of 2021, 22, if we look at those and realize we were training back then, but the kind of the great resignation that happened brings us to the point that we have so many newer sales associates that are back on the that are on the floors. And so every bit of this is kind of a cycle, and I think it's going to continue to be a cycle for the next few years.
Okay, Josh.
Yeah, and I agree a lot with Matt and with everyone. But gosh, we're humans, and sales is such a human thing. And unfortunately, we can go through all this training, and if we were robots, we could lock that in and then, carry that with us everywhere we go. But unfortunately, we're forgetful, and we go through seasons of life, and, things happen. And so we're constantly needing these refreshers. And now more than ever, because as Matt was saying, we went through, I know for our business, we went through this period of just awesome demand. And unfortunately, it did weaken some of our sales professionals' abilities because they just had people begging them to buy product. And now we kind of just need to get back to the basics and get back to that human connection. So I think, that's kind of where my mind is at.
And I think, I was being a little bit flippant, but I mean, I think you guys all latched on to the point here. And that is that, yeah, this is an ever evolving customer base. Certainly with, we've gone from, from feast to famine, right? When it comes to the number of people coming in the store, we know that. I love what you said, Mary, about the fact that it's not just numbers though. It's like the whole, the whole dynamic. And really and truly, and Matt, you and I've spoken about this one-on-one, is that, and I don't want to look back, we're going to look forward here in a second, but when the times were good is probably when those best practices should have been really hammered home. And less time on the necessarily the high-fiving on aren't sales great, and that was the maybe the time to do that. But let me ask you this: is it? And you can see that we're going to jump off in a lot of different areas here. If you were going to pick, and I'll again throw this out to the group here, and somebody can jump in. Of these four things, which would you say right now is the one that's the most concerning to retailers? Is it poor motivation? Is it poor hiring? Is it poor internal practices? Is it poor coaching? If you were going to pick which one you think right now is the one that's lacking perhaps the most, or is the biggest challenge for the retailers watching this, what would that be of those four that I mentioned?
I'll jump in there from my side. What I have seen, what I've felt, being part of the Sales Academy, and I'll use a combination of those four, and I'll kind of use a fifth. Getting back to the contrary is, I would say, in the last year and a half or so, training has become so much more. It's about the skill set, but I think that we've got to focus more on the mindset before the skill set. If we're trying to push training on people that aren't ready to be trained, and I think that's where my mind continues to go. Is there are a lot of people that are working for us that are not ready to be trained, and they're pushing back on it. And I think we've got to change their mindset before we change their skill set.
Well, I want to dig deeper into that in a minute, but let me let the others jump in if they'd like to, about which of those things you think are the biggest challenges right now.
I would do similar to what Matt said, and that is that I'll take one of them but expand on it, and I would put it on coaching, and really put it on sales management, because I think that sales managers are the most pivotal role in an organization, and yet it's not always clearly defined what their job is. The job of putting money in the drawer doesn't usually falls to being a senior customer service person managing business that's already in the system. And so their function of driving new sales, coaching, observing, modeling, redirecting, sitting with someone, doing skill drills, doing daily huddles, you name it. That doesn't always happen with the level of consistency that it needs to, because they get pulled in other directions that take them away from that. So
Interesting.
I would say that.
Mary, I see you nodding.
I mean, that is just a great call out in the day in and day out, 100%. The other thing that I want to tie into there is, it's kind of interesting, it's a hiring thing as well. Every one of those components, like it's hard to put an equal weight to each one of them, but definitely as the hiring climate has gotten more difficult, I've certainly seen businesses kind of go, I'll take anybody because I have to fill a slot. And sometimes we're not putting the right people, even at the door level, at the sales associate level, in the right position. So yes, then the motivation becomes a problem. And it's just a trickle down from there, because are they even able to absorb the training as well?
I want to get back to that in a second. I want to actually, Josh, I want to put you on the spot, because You just heard, and by the way, if you don't mention this at your next review, you're crazy. But Jody just talked about the fact that the sales manager is the most important role when we're talking about this revenue driver. That is your title. How do you feel about that? I mean, is it you're in a larger store, but it's one of those things where is that definition on your job did Jody hit that? Or are you really just driving the revenue piece and thinking about that and less about a lot of the mechanical issues, if you will?
Yeah, I think she couldn't have said it more perfectly. There was an article in the Harvard Business Review that kind of talked about how middle management across almost every industry and every business sector is being taxed like never before. And I think that definitely exists in the furniture industry specifically, definitely being pulled in so many different directions. And it's so easy to become reactive instead of proactive, when really the job of a good sales manager should be to find proactive ways to drive growth and to drive revenue and to drive customer loyalty and to create that experience for the consumer when they walk through the building. But yet you get so tied down with, looking at data and managing processes and managing, schedules and just, customer, all of these things. So I'm obviously a little bit biased because I'm actually, a manager who manages other managers. And so I'm always going to put the onus on myself and on them. That's kind of the critical function, is to be sure that we have the time and the space in order to, really creatively use the best of our energies to drive sales and to be out with our staff, to be talking with them, coaching them, those sorts of things. So like I said before, getting back to the basics is a big thing for us in 2024.
I want to go one step further, a little granular here. And Jody, I want to get your response to this. A lot of the people watching this, don't have the advantage of having a large staff. It could be the owner and a handful of people. So when you're talking to somebody who might be the owner of a single store, what do you tell them as far as when it comes to how much time they should be spending as a sales manager and that part of the role, when not everybody has the ability to have, a sales manager on staff? Oh, you're muted. There you are. That's okay.
I think that's kind of the problem, though, Mark, is that somebody's got to own that role. And I work with owners that own that role, or they're the ones like what Josh is doing that manage other managers, right? And so, but someone's got to own that from the goals are that are in alignment. Everything's got to be in alignment. And the sales role, I know that we give salespeople's goals, but everybody's got goals. Like operations has goals and the warehouse has goals, but everybody's got to be in alignment. But I think that what happens is that the sales manager job doesn't get held as a specific individual job. And then the clarity about what that job is and what they meant to do to drive new opportunities and build new skills and performance and actually own it. Like in my world, the store goal is the sales manager's goal. That's your goal. There's no store goal. That's the sales manager's goal. And the salespeople are the vehicles for goal achievement, just like customers are their vehicles for achievement. So I think when we get really serious about it, everything shifts, because like perspective is reality on this. How we see the sales manager's role impacts the results that we ultimately get on the floor.
Okay, and I appreciate you clarifying that, because right out of the gates here, before we come up with any other takeaways, I mean, this is the foundational piece, right? You've got to identify who's leading these efforts, who's the one responsible, and then we can talk about how they perform these things like coaching and other things. I mean, I totally get it. I really want to get back to something that Matt said, and Matt, this kind of confounds me, and I want you to have a chance to explain it, which I love that. You said mindset before skill set. And you talked about people not ready to be trained. And I think that might be counterintuitive to some people watching this. They're going to be, what are you talking about? I hired this person. I'm going to start training them right now. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that's an important nuance.
Sure. So I think, like Mary was saying a few minutes ago, where so many people get to a spot where they're just, they start filling a spot. And, they know they have to hire someone and they need a warm body in there. And that type stuff does happen. And so once you get that person, even if it was just putting a warm body in there, is taking that time to clearly define, just like you guys were just saying, is clearly define what's going to be happening and what those expectations are, of how that's going to work, even after you've hired them, if you are in that really tough spot. And I think that's a road that we do need to go down and talk about today, is what she brought up, but clearly defining. So every role in our organization, we've got kind of what we call the 1-3-1. And the 1-3-1 for us is that we want to clearly define every single issue. So if we've got something going on, we clearly define the issue. We come up with 3 recommendations of, 3 possibilities of what might happen, and then have 1 actual recommendation of how we're going to do this. And specifically relating to training, if somebody is, not hitting their goals from a sales associate's level, or not hitting their goals from a sales manager level, then let's clearly define exactly what should be happening, and then take that a little bit further and make sure they understand that definition that is there. And from a training role, what are the expectations? What standards are we going to hold our people to make sure that they are properly trained, and make sure that they're not just looking at the outcome. Because I think another piece to this whole puzzle is that progress is so invisible sometimes. If they do jump on the training and they say, well, I watched 5 videos, or I listened to a webinar, or I did all these different things, but I didn't get 5 more customers in the door right away, and then they give up. And it's the same thing with weight loss and all these other things in life, that progress is invisible at many times. And the frustration, but just like you said at the very beginning, getting back to this whole thing, the consistency. And so getting into their mind that we have to be consistent, getting into their mind what progress is going to feel like, because you won't be able to see it. You can feel it before you see it. And getting through every bit of that before we even turn them on to the training. And that's what I'm talking about.
Mary, you look like you had some thoughts there.
No, I'm nodding and agreeing completely with what he's saying, because a lot of people sometimes they don't even understand what it means to be a sales professional and everything that is going to entail, in particular in our industry, and the building blocks that need to be in place. So you can download all kinds of information, and as Matt was saying, they can watch 5 webinars, and it's not going to change or dramatically impact how they interact with their customer to get to the end result, which is a sale, and a sale that's right for the customer. So it's, a lot of what he's putting out there is so true right at the foundational level.
I mean, it's interesting, because I like, Matt, the one thing that you talked about is that, this is one of those things where you don't often always see the results. And so it's hard, right? It's letting somebody understand that this is not just magic. You just add water and boom, the sale happens and your close ratio is higher. So I guess Jody and Josh, I'll let you guys jump in on this too. So how do you do that for the people watching this that are trying to motivate their staff? How do you make sure that you can help them through those moments when it's not an instantaneous, situation where they're suddenly now sales are great because they watch 2 training videos? I mean, how do you manage around that?
Well, actions are the only things that produce results, right? And so if we're not watching and specifically observing actions, then we can't get the small progress. We can't do small celebrations. We can't do wins for things that someone did. They may not have gotten the sale or an appointment, but they got a budget and they never were able to do that before. They handled an objection they couldn't handle before. But that comes from observing and from the specific actions that we're looking to see, that ultimately, when all the pieces fall into place, produce the outcome that you're looking for. And I think that the thing that Matt said that impacts all of that is, and it is the mindset. I mean, it's my program's called Sell It or Schedule It, because that's the end game. That's what we're looking for from every interaction. And if you don't go into an interaction looking for one of those 2 things, something's going to happen, but it's not necessarily one of those 2 things. So it's like, what's the intention and what's the outcome we're looking for?
Gotcha. There's a lot of great questions that people had leading up to this webinar, and I think this is a great time to kind of toss this one out here real quick. And this is a great question about this really boosting performance, et cetera. It says, what are the 3 things to focus on in 2024 to improve the effectiveness of any sales team? Can you guys jump in and give maybe your top 3 things that as of today are maybe the most critical for improving performance? Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in. I think,
Sure.
one of the big things that we're going to focus on is, our chief retail officer, Ethan, he said, service is a monologue, but hospitality is a dialogue. And I think it's that dialogue that we're really going to be searching for in 2024. Again, coming out of the pandemic and we created some of these lazy sales behaviors because it was more about, what's the process? How do I buy this? How do I get out the door? And that's kind of what we were geared to do. But the landscape has changed, and the macroeconomic conditions are a little bit tougher, and customers are being a little more cognizant of how they're spending their money. And so we have to get back to building those relationships and to really encouraging that dialogue between the sales professional and the customer, and really shifting to a value-based sales process. How do we, as a business and more specifically as a sales professional, how do I illustrate to the consumer that the service that I offer has value to you, that it impacts your lifestyle?
And this has got to be more critical now too, because of the fact that the traffic has been down for quite some time. So you're dealing with a smaller, group of prospects here. Correct, Mary? Would you agree with that? Is what Josh really talked about? Is this really getting back to the basics of that relationship driven piece? I mean, I know we kind of beat that drum a lot, but that's what I'm hearing.
100%, because it's not about just selling the customer something. It's about selling the customer the right thing. And you're not going to find out what the right thing is for that customer unless you take the time to build the relationship, investigate the need that drove them out, and set yourself apart from your competition. Because the other thing that the pandemic certainly did is it caused everybody to think they needed to open furniture stores everywhere because we're all going to be this successful. So now many of us have more competition in closer driving distance. And the only thing that really sets you apart from your competition is how you interact and how you build value with your customer. Build value in you and your knowledge, and build value in the products that you are offering and how those products are going to meet the customer's needs.
And that's the basic. And Matt, we've talked about this before too. That's the very basic approach too when it comes to referrals, when it comes to that person coming back again and spending. I mean, so this is really clearly foundational right now in this environment of not real high traffic, correct?
Yeah, I think you guys are hitting it on the head. I think creating the experience from the moment that they pull up in your parking lot to them walking through your door, create the experience, because every single one of us, when we go out to eat, when we go to a sporting event, when we go to, wherever we go and whatever we do, like Josh said, the hospitality environment that we are in, people want to feel special, and people don't want to be, it's that they want to be greeted early on, and they want to have an experience when they come into your store. And I think that's what that's the building blocks to those relationships being created, that they feel special when they come in your store, they have an experience when they come in your store, and then they want to talk about it. They want to tell their friends about it. And that's what creates those referrals that end up coming in and asking for you.
And Jody, I want you to weigh in on this too, because what we're talking about here, and this kind of gets back to my very flippant question at the beginning. I mean, man, we're talking about, this is back to basics. I mean, really and truly, right? We're talking about stuff this is not rocket science, not something that's just new in 2024, these last couple of years. I mean, I remember this being pounded into my head, my first retail job 45 years ago. Jody, are we kind of really hitting on this here as far as it is this relationship piece that it's at the very epicenter of everything when it comes to increasing sales? And yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I think yes. And
Okay.
this is going to, this often shows up for me as one of those things that we say we are, but we aren't.
Okay. Tell me more.
We say we're a be-back business, but we don't really encourage that. We don't make appointments for it. We say a lot of things that we think we are, or we think we want to be known for being, but we don't really take those actions with any consistency as an industry. And there are outliers on all sides of it. But I don't think that as an industry, we have a reputation as a place that people want to go unless they absolutely have to, which is why I think anyone that walks in the door is always a buyer, because they could do it online. We're down to 1.8 stores that people visit now to buy furniture. 1.8. It used to be 4.
Oops, Jody, Jody, you froze there for a second. Josh, you want to also jump in on that? I saw you were kind of leaning in.
Yeah, no, I was just, again, always shocked by that statistic, 1.8 visits.
That's what happens, is that we take our eye off what the most important things are that we can teach and encourage for that to happen. And it goes back to your original question, and this does include relationships, and that would be sales managers can't focus on everything. So if there are going to be things that are highest impact things that produce results in my world, 3 things. If there are 3 things that impact both close ratio and average sale, also known as dollars per opportunity: sketching, appointments, and financing, because all 3 of those increase both close ratio and average sale. And you can't sketch without a connection, and you can't get financing unless they do it on the website. But those 3, and you can't make appointments without a connection. So if we focus on those things, and the fallout and the things that contribute to them, I think we're going to get all of what we're looking to get.
Josh?
Yeah, no, exactly. Again, I'm always shocked by that statistic, 1.8 visits before a customer makes a decision. And, again, it's just getting back to that. I love that Jody said, we say we want to be this be-back business. We say we want to be relational based, but yet we don't do it. And, even in our business at NFM, obviously the velocity of our business makes it a little bit difficult, but those are the things we have to teach our sales managers to do. And then the sales managers need to get into the trenches. That's, our big focus is getting into the trenches and helping them understand, how exactly do I do that? What words need to come out of my mouth in order for me to make this appointment, in order for me to get this B2B business? What is a phone? I mean, so many of our sales reps don't really understand what a phone conversation looks like versus a conversation in store. And we have to be able to teach them those nuances. So yeah, I think that's a really great point.
Mary, how do you make sure that what we're talking about here is exemplified on the sales floor and repeated on the sales floor?
Well, the one thing that sometimes can make an associate uncomfortable, which is, being an active presence out on the sales floor. And absolutely, if they take a breather moment, checking in, finding out what's going on with the customer, encouraging them to get the sketch if they haven't gotten the sketch. Sometimes that's some of the biggest resistance that I have seen across multiple organizations. I don't need a sketch for a chair. Yes, you do need a sketch for a chair. You need a sketch for everything, because if you want to grow your ticket and you want to communicate to the customer that you're trying to sell them the right thing, not only for their physical comfort, but for their psychological comfort when they're looking around their room, you need to understand all the elements of what is going on in the room.
Would you define for everybody, when you guys talk about sketch, would you define that for those that are wondering about exactly that terminology?
Jody, take it away, because I know that you preach what I preach. So you go ahead.
So I'm with you on that. So sketching is fundamentally a communication tool, right? It's fundamentally meant to build a conversation that is literally and figuratively getting people on the same page in the same conversation. It elevates the conversation to move it toward a close. It's a serious conversation. It's not offhand. And like financing and protection, I look at sketching that we first have to handle exactly what Mary said. We have to handle the objections that salespeople have to those before we can handle the objections that customers have to them. Right? Because they're not doing it because salespeople aren't doing it. And there are like 6 reasons salespeople don't sketch. But unless we deal with those things, then we're not going to get it. And it is the holy grail. It's the best tool in the toolbox, period, barring none. Of doing anything you want to do is going to be, the sketch is going to be one of the best vehicles to get it done.
And that's the basis for the relationship building, right? That's
exactly
the basis.
And it's just like, it's a sketch. It's boxes on boxes. It's not fringe on pillows, right?
Okay. Matt, I want to ask you a question because we're getting a lot of good questions coming in live here. So I want to let you tackle this one. People are always looking at data, right? And hoping that can then help them with this. This is, what data do we have about what customers really want to experience today, process, organization, behavior, when they pull up and walk in? So are there any insights you can give folks as far as what we know that the customer walking in the door today, what it is they're looking for and seeking?
Sure. I think the basis for, and I've literally traveled the country in the last year and a half watching this happen, north, south, east, and west, is they want a warm greet to start the entire process off. And from that warm greet, they want to be able to go look around and not feel like we're like shadowing right over them. But when they pick their head up to start looking around, they've looked at some furniture, and we call it the moment of settlement. When they've looked at some furniture and then they start like touching the leathers or touching the fabrics and kind of slow down and look, they want us to be close enough that when they pick their head up and start looking left and looking right, they want to know that we have paid close enough attention to them as a customer that we can then come in and answer their questions. And I think that's, that time between a greet and a reapproach is the most critical time there, where after you've greeted, some sales associates, they walk off, they go take a phone call, they go back behind a desk, they go talk to other customers, they get so spread out. And because stores have been so lean lately with employees and with team members, that they start getting into all these other things. But the moment that you aren't there to answer questions for them, that's when they start feeling like just another number, just another customer, just another somebody. And I think the basis to, there's so many different pieces that we can get into here, but I think in the very foundation, a lot of this just feels foundational today. And so I do want to kind of stick there. The warm greet, and then the time between the greet and the reapproach, of making sure that when they pick their head back up and they're looking left and looking right, that moment right then is going to determine I think in so many cases, whether they're going to trust you, whether you can start building that rapport with them, whether they're going to allow you into their lives enough to start building that relationship. And then, from there, if you want to take it a step further, then you can start asking them more questions during that discovery time of figuring out what their needs are. When you do start to get that sketch going, is to pull out some other relationship information out of them, to figure out maybe what it is, what they do hobby wise, or all these other things, so that you can start to use them, use their first name basis. There's so many different pieces that you can in the sales process there. But to me, the warm greet and the time between the greet and the reapproach of making, don't let them ever feel like just another number or just another customer.
And Josh, I'll let you kind of jump in here on this piece, because it seems to me that there's a little bit of an art to that, right? I mean, it's about paying attention without being overbearing, I guess. But you guys have to deal with that a lot with your sheer volume. So how do you manage that?
Well, yeah, we have, like you said, a ton of customers that come through our door. We have a large sales force. And it's really about instilling this culture that, again, that hospitality is, we're here to welcome people into our home. And if everyone is doing that all the time, then the customer never feels neglected. And I think that's an important piece of this. He mentioned a warm greeting. I like to say authentic. As long as it's authentic, sometimes we put a lot of focus on like, well, you got to say this special thing or do this special thing to get the customer
Right.
and, to bite. But in reality, if you're just authentic, if you're welcoming, and you're knowledgeable about answering questions and helpful through the process, when we're looking at our data points, the helpfulness of the staff is one of the main drivers of our customer engagement scores. And not just helpfulness in terms of product knowledge, but we all have processes that our stores follow in order to go from, the customer coming in to getting the product in their home. How easy is it for the salesperson to help them navigate through that process is another big thing. So yeah, I I think that authenticity and that operational transparency is huge.
Love that. And that's what I love about that is that you're talking about getting it right out of the gates. I mean, you got to be on your game. That warm greeting. I mean, so you're talking about from the first moment, it's really, really critical. Here's a great question that came in too, and I'll throw this out, and Jody and Mary, I'll let one of you jump on this one. It says, which behaviors are best to look out for a successful sales associate? So what are some of those, especially when we talk about this warm greeting and this intuitiveness, et cetera? What do you think are the behaviors that if anybody watching this is wanting to hire new people, what they should be looking for? And maybe that's an impossible question to answer, but let's see if we can kick it around for a second.
Okay, I'll bite for it is a little bit. I wish there was. Really wish like, oh, this is the perfect person, and if you get them, hire them, because there are some intangibles that you discover during the interview. But one, you certainly have to look for somebody who actually likes to talk to people. I mean, it's very important to have, just not just simple, basic relational skills, but people that can have an opportunity who like to talk, and they're talking more in the interview than you're talking. That's a very important thing to look for. If you're doing most of the talking in the interview, then you're just liking to hear yourself talk. You've got to let this other individual talk, learn about them, see that they're comfortable communicating, sharing their ideas, sharing their opinions about things, because that's going to be very important in the whole selling process. And then, I don't always necessarily want to hire somebody who has a furniture background, because I like, sometimes you have habits you don't want to have to spend a lot of time breaking. And because they came from a furniture end that doesn't have the same mission in mind. We have a design-centric business here. Our goal is to sell it or book it, get a designer into the home. That's a little bit of a different selling mindset than it is for, different types of furniture companies that do really want to hit them off the door and just keep going. So there are some intangibles I don't want to just lay out there, because it's not cookie cutter. It's finding the right person isn't cookie cutter.
Okay. Appreciate that. Jody, let me ask you, oh, go ahead. Yeah, go, jump.
I would say take some of the gut work, guesswork out of it, and do pre-employment testing. Benchmark your team, especially your top producers, and then do pre-employment testing so that you actually know what you've got scientifically, and not just how someone wants to present themselves to you when they come in looking to sell you on giving them a job. And so, and I like that. I find it successful, and it's science. It's not just guesswork.
But describe that a little bit more for me. What do you mean by benchmarking when someone
Well, when you benchmark, when you use instruments to evaluate and assess your team, you're assessing them in terms of selling skills, you're assessing them in terms of what they're motivated. I mean, the instruments that I use, you're getting their behavioral styles, which is what are predictable behaviors. I use DISC, and that stuff, you can't make that stuff up. And you're going to find that. You're also going to find core competencies, the things that people are good at. We say we want people to follow up, and yet most people don't do it. But that's the kind of stuff that you can test for to see if they actually have it in their, not just their skill set, but in their motivation set. So that one of the questions that comes up is, how do I motivate people? It's like you can't motivate it just by guessing. You need to understand how they're motivated, or not just try to motivate them by what you're motivated by, which is what most people do unsuccessfully.
Okay, fair. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I'd like to take one quick moment there also, if you don't mind. Okay.
Of course.
To jump in is one other piece that I've really jumped on the bandwagon for in the last couple of years is coachability. And so how coachable are the people that I'm bringing onto my team? And one way that I do that is that, I might ask them some, kind of a role play with me some sales scenarios. And, we might go through where they're the customer and I'm the sales associate, and we just kind of role play that back and forth, and then we'll flip it back. But then, depending on how they answer my questions, I'm going to actually coach them right there in the interview of say, hey, I might have done this, or might have done this, I might have said this, or, kind of give them a couple of quick hints and tips of, here's how I might have handled that. And then I'll go right in 5 minutes later and ask them, let's role play one more time before you get out of here, before you get finished with this interview, and just see if they picked up on any of those.
See what stuck, right? See if it clicked with them.
Yeah, see if any of it at all stuck, to see if they are coachable at all. Yeah.
And Jody, you kind of struck a nerve here, a good one. The follow-up question says, how do you test for those skills in an interview, though? Because I think that what Mary said and what Matt's talking about is how these things adapt and are they communicative? Do they listen? Those sorts of things. So how do you really test those DISC skills to these interpersonal skills that everybody's been talking about today?
Well, it's an assessment. So let's imagine that everything we're talking about has some relationship to everything we're talking about. And that the first interview is kind of like greeting someone, right? That if we think greeting someone is like getting married versus a first date, then what our expectation is of that interaction is going to be different. So what's our expectation of what the first interview is meant to do, which is to get you to the second interview? What are you looking to find out in the first one? So I might not give someone a test because it's expensive. I'm not going to give someone a test until the second interview to see if I actually want to take them. And there are some things that I need to understand about how to evaluate someone at the first interview that's going to get us to the next one. And there are sales aptitude tests out there.
And you could, I guess you could meld all these things together too. Where in that process do you want to just get a feel for them as an individual, to Mary's point, how they communicate, Matt's point, how they adjust to training. So I can really see that everybody could take away from this. You can really kind of put that process together the way that you're comfortable with.
Exactly.
I want to ask, and this is going to be an interesting one for you, Josh, because you're not a small retailer, but yet I think you can appreciate this question. This was a great question that came in earlier. It says, what's the lowest hanging fruit for most small retailers to drive sales performance? And this is going to get into a lot of what you guys do department to department, but do you have something, and then I'll let anybody else jump in. What do you think is the low hanging fruit right now to drive sales performance for any retailer out there, but particularly small ones?
I think, especially at the department level, but, small retailers, is getting really good data around, what you're selling and how your salespeople are, interacting with customers and, that kind of thing, I think is kind of low hanging fruit, because, if you can introduce some of that technology or even introduce some of those data points, then you can start figuring out, how do I motivate the salesperson? Salespeople obviously are income driven. And, if we can figure out what they're selling, how they're selling it, and really get them focused on some specific things that maybe help us to grow our margins or, things like that, I think that's some real low hanging fruit. And so, for me departmentally, when I can teach my sales managers to get a little bit better understanding of the data that they're looking at, obviously a company of our size, we have lots of, data tools at our disposal. But if I can get a sales manager to really understand how they can, look at the data and then articulate that with the salesperson and come up with game plans, then I think that's kind of that low hanging fruit that some of these smaller retailers, if they can get some of these data points, it's going to give them some real clear direction on how to get better.
And Matt, I know you've successfully worked with a lot of smaller retailers as well. What would you suggest is you would consider the low hanging fruit when it comes to driving sales performance?
I think to kind of put older, more seasoned sales associates with some younger ones and have some shadowing going on back and forth there. You use the, especially for those small, the small business owners, where either themselves, they could get out on the floor and make sure their people are shadowing them. But I think a lot of times we push those younger sales associates right into, making sure they are greeting or making sure they're taking ups and all these different things. And I think a lot of that could come from within and could use the resources that are there.
Appreciate that. Let's get into, I'm going to toss this one out to anybody that wants to take it, but there's a couple of areas that people ask the most questions about. So here's the solve the mystery. So how do we today, 2024, January, how do we increase close rates in this environment today? Who wants to jump on that one first? How do we increase close rates?
For me, go ahead, Jody. If you want to go.
That's okay.
I mean, to me, well, it's everything that we've been talking about and then some, but it is following the tenets of the successful selling processes from A through B. And if if you build the relationship and goal yourself to meet the needs of your customer through the right investigative questions, and you show and sell the benefits of the right merchandise to meet their needs, you're absolutely 100% going to increase your close ratio. But you've got to, if my philosophy is always, if you build it, they will come. It's kind of my field of dreams furniture thing. But if you just take the greet to the reapproach, to the sketch, to the engagement, to the show, the merchandise, building the relationship, you're going to get to the point within every interaction where you are asking for the sale, or you are booking a design, or you are scheduling an appointment for the customer to return to you to make their final decisions. While you can navigate your own way through that and maybe not do everything in the same order, you need to follow those steps in order to improve your close ratio. And you have to do it each customer after each customer and have your head in the game with every opportunity that you're given.
Yeah, I love where she's going with that. And for myself to take that a step further is make sure you do have a sales process, especially for those small business owners that might only have one or two sales associates and think, oh, we don't need a process. We just, we greet them and we talk to them and they buy from us. Well, if you are really wanting to increase that closing ratio, properly define your sales process and make sure that all your people on the team are consistent with that sales process. So know it and understand it, but then to take it a step further with your sales associates is to make sure that they are also properly defining the issues of the customer that are coming in. So many times we get so promotional minded where, the customer walks in and they say, well, I'm looking for a sofa, and you take them directly to a sofa without qualifying what's going on. Get them to talk about the room that they're the room that they're building, get their dreams going, draw those pictures, sketch that whole thing out and talk about it before you go looking at any furniture in the store. And I think we get, as sales associates, we get, too quick, slow everything down and make sure that you are consistent with your process, that you properly define that process, that you carry that out every single time, and that you're able to offer your customer, your potential customer, offer them 3 different options. People love options. And if you will properly define those options and then give them a recommendation of what you would do, you're gonna raise those closing rates.
So that, yeah,
So can I
love.
offer something there? So if so the question was, how do you increase close rates, right? So don't write everybody in. Like, this is where the tail wags can wag the dog. But if you want to increase close ratio, you just don't count everybody. And so it does. I'm serious. The salespeople know that. And so when we look at how to increase close ratio and not have the tail wagging the dog, right?
Yeah.
Right? That what we look at, and I'm going to say something that's going to be whatever it's going to be, is that if that's the goal, to raise close ratio, there are things that we can do that we don't want to do. Like have your top producers be in rotation more frequently than you have new people. So if you've got someone with a less than 20% close ratio, don't have them in the same rotation with someone at 40% close ratio. Now, we look at a rotation system as a fairness doctrine. That's going to rub up against us philosophically, but that's not what a rotation's meant for.
But
right?
Jody, as you say this though, and I get where you're going with.
Oh,
with
let
that,
me finish because I'm going to go
right,
to what Matt said. So let's say that you don't have someone's a new person, less than 20% close ratio. They're not going to be in tight rotation with everybody else. But what they are going to do is they're going to use your sales strategy to actually observe people who are doing it and getting it done so they can see the behavior model that you want. And I would run those people through an observation first to make sure that they're doing it. Because when we do things a little bit differently to get a different outcome, that's going to help. The other thing might be teach them how to close on the phone, because then it's 100% close ratio if you only count it as a traffic unit once, and teach them how to use the podium or the buy button to just send them a text and get that to close right now. Those 3 things are going to increase close ratio.
I got to be honest though. I hear you, and I understand how those things all work and fit together. But to me, when I hear that, I'm like going, throw the close ratio out, because you can pad the numbers anywhere you want. That's what you're talking about there, is you can make those look as rosy as you want them to make, depending on what you include and what you don't include, or you're going to put your high producers versus your lower producers. Then I'm kind of like, then what's the point of the close ratio? Why is that then a KPI? Especially when we've been talking about, you got to get to that point, you've got to make sure that you've got a sales process, you're doing all these things leading up to it.
But it
I'm
does
kinda
do
like-
that. And if the sales manager is actually out on the floor, fully
Yep.
engaged with the team, this is part of what you're looking at. Remember, a close ratio is a performance indicator. By itself, it never tells the whole story, and it's never meant to. So without observation, it's just half of the information.
That's where you've made my point. And that's my point to everybody
Exactly.
listening to this is don't be stuck on that for what it is. You've got to see what goes into it
Exactly.
and what leads up to it. That's what I loved about what you guys talked about this process. So Josh, I think this will dovetail nicely. Because I know that you guys are huge on KPIs. So this is a great question. This is like maybe it's unanswerable, but this one came in. What KPIs, and I love this, what KPIs energize and inspire the staff, and which don't? So when you guys have so much at your fingertips, Josh, are there KPIs that you find are the ones that your team is latching onto and that it's energizing them versus weighting them down?
Yeah, maybe this is too simple of an answer, but any KPI that is not actionable is not going to be beneficial. And what I mean by that is, like, especially with us, there's so many data points that we can point to that may indicate performance, but sometimes some of those little things, they're not actionable for our sales staff for whatever reason, because we have a certain process in place or whatever the case may be. We want to be giving our staff, and we really try and give visibility to our staff KPIs, because we want this to be a partnership. And if it grows from this partnership and we say, hey, here's some of the data points that we found interesting, what do you think about that? Oftentimes, if we hired the right person, they start to come up with solutions on their own. And so as long as the data points are actionable, as long as they feel, hey, I understand this and I understand how that equates again to my paycheck, then those are exciting. And then of course, salespeople, they're always a little bit competitive, especially on a showroom as big as ours. So anytime you can add a little level of competition to that, I think those are energizing and exciting as well. But in the end, they've got to be simple and actionable, and there's got to be involvement from the sales team.
And Matt, please jump in relating to KPIs that you think are the ones that you've seen really be those inspirational ones that really do drive positive behaviors for sales teams.
Sure, I really enjoyed. So to piggyback on what Josh said, yes, I think challenging the sales teams in such a way that it is kind of becomes a competition, because we all want to win. But I think one of those big ones for me that I'll focus on right now is average sale, and I think it's a lot of fun if someone comes in only looking for a sofa that they need to put in a living room. If we do take that extra time and we do properly define what that customer might actually need, then by the time I've kind of drawn that room out for them, maybe we figured out that they want, or they need a sofa, but they might want, the rugs and the lamps and the tables and the love seat and the recliner. And if I can draw that picture well enough for them to show them a little bit of what you need and a little bit of what you want, get that average sale up, then that average sale, and a little bit of an increased close ratio, maybe we're rocking and rolling.
So add-ons, things like that. Okay, that sounds. No, I think that's a great way to put it, and I like that, because that's really motivational, right? And that's truly in their hands. That's truly in your sales team's ability, because they're the ones who can make that happen. If they really are listening and going through this process. We're kind of getting toward the end here, and I'm going to do. It's been a very unconventional webinar. I'm just doing things a little bit differently. I want to go around to each of you, and Mary, I want to start with you and ask you this question, because there's so many ways that we can talk about strategies and boosting sales performance. We've touched on a lot of great stuff today. but I don't want to leave without making sure that I've polled each of you to give those the nugget or two that you want to make sure that people walk away with, anything we might have missed or that we didn't spend a lot of time on. So Mary, what would you say would be the maybe the takeaways that you want to make sure that anybody, watching this webinar will take with them today?
I think first and foremost, each one of our businesses need to understand who they are as an organization and how they want to represent what they do and what they sell to their consumer. Because if you understand what you want to be known for within your market, then you can better train your associates in the skill sets that are necessary to meet that expectation. So if you want to be a turn 'em and burn 'em commodity business, you're going to train your associates differently than you're going to train them to be a design centric or whole room focused business. So really understand what you are getting into and who you want your people to be. And once there's that understanding, then you build your training program and your selling process based off of that. The selling process that Jody, our company uses Jody's program and her coaching, and it's outstanding. And it's a core tenet, even though in my past life we did not use that. Identical program almost. It was amazing when I joined this organization, and it's going to be the most successful if you choose to be relational. So I think it's just, making sure that all the different people that are working for different companies listening to this really take a step back and identify who am I working for and what are my expectations and what is the best selling method in order to be successful within this environment that I'm in, and build your process from there and stick to it.
Matt, I'll turn to you next.
Sure. For myself, I'll go back to what I talked about at the very beginning of this call, was the 1-3-1 process. And that 1-3-1 is to, number one, define the issue, whether it's with management, whether it's a sales associate to a customer, any of those pieces. And then from there, then we can get 3 possible outcomes of this whole thing. And then once we talk about those 3 options that we've given, then out of that, we can find one recommendation. And I think that 1-3-1, can take us, if we want to go deeper and talk about the pattern interrupts of when a customer walks in the store, what their expectations are walking into our store and how we can interrupt that pattern for them to get that sale. We can go down that. But I think the biggest takeaway for me from this would be the 1-3-1. To make sure that that's the start to any process for us in the furniture industry.
Okay, Josh.
Well, a couple things, but I think the main thing is to echo something Jody said earlier, is sales coaching, sales coaching, sales coaching. I think it is critical going into coming out of this year and going into a new year where we're a little unsure of, what traffic counts are going to look like, and we're all focused on maximizing each and every customer. And I think as sales leaders, oftentimes we're great at explaining to our sales associates where we need them to go, but we're not quite great at explaining exactly how they can get there. So, getting really granular with it and saying, hey, if you say this at this particular time and with these particular types of customers, then you're going to maximize your profits and your value and all of those things. So I think that is really my big message in 2024. So.
All right, Jody, I'm giving you the last word. You're welcome.
Well, of course, everything that everyone has said, which is perfect, right? And I think, in summary is that the more hands-on and the more engaged you are in it, if, as Mary said, if you know who you are and what your mission is, if you're aligned to do that, if you have your systems in place to do that, it's going to get down to execution. And it really is going to fall a lot on the sales managers to do that, because they're in that position to coach, to train, to observe, to do the huddles, to do all of it that shows up with the salespeople, right? Shows up in their performance. So that's what I would say.
Gotcha. And I want to mention, by the way, the question just came up. Everybody that is joining us live will get the link to this webinar afterwards so that you can see it again. But remember, myhfa.org/webinar, the entire library is there for that. I think that also the one thing that I think just came through clearly in these last couple of comments is that there's no magic pill. It's about paying attention to your business. Your business is going to be different than anybody else's. And you've got to really make sure that you're contouring these suggestions to the team you've got, to the demographics you're dealing with, all of the above. So I think that's been great. This has been fantastic. And I can only hope that the rest of this year of 2024 that we end up with tremendous webinars like this. I want to thank our guests, Matt Pridemore, sales trainer at the HFA Sales Academy. Appreciate you very much. Jody Sievert, owner of One by One. Jody, really enjoyed having you here.
Thank you so
Josh
much.
Ortiz, sales director with NFM in the Colony. We thank you, and Mary Holzer with Interiors Home. As always, I wish everybody who's joining us good health and good sales. On behalf of everybody here at HFA, I'm Mark Schumacher. Thank you, and we will see you next time.